Good evening, everybody. This is Monica Guzman coming to you live once again. Uh, Tonight, I'm finishing up my Cap Anson series. Uh, this is my sixth episode, using him as a stepping stone into what I'm going to be doing in the future. And so tonight, I decided to leave the most controversial part about Cap Anson, according to MLB Marxists. Um, I wanted to give you the opportunity to get to know him first. Understand that he was just another American living on American soil, doing his thing, and 100 years later, some Marxist decides that he's a villain, and I don't believe that. And MLB isn't popular in America, so it's one of the reasons why when the American baseball pioneers have been canceled by MLB's Marxists, it doesn't pick up any traction because the sport just doesn't mean anything to Americans anymore. It's the people who are most enthralled in MLB today are literally the ones that are closest to the sport, either as a bureaucrat, as a member of the echo chamber, as somebody who's trying to break into that industry. So, um, again, it doesn't. When Ty Cobb got canceled, I don't think it picked up traction, and then there's been a bigger effort to cancel Cap Anson now, and again, that doesn't pick up any traction either because Americans just don't care about MLB. But I'm surfacing this because I believe that what's happening in America, I believe benefits the side that's attempting to preserve America, and I believe we need to restart America. This is another perspective for you guys to use as a jump off point, another perspective to round out uh, what we're all trying to accomplish, which is to preserve this great country. And the American baseball pioneers weren't jocks the way we see jocks defined today. They were men. They were quintessential Americans that were part of the fabric of this country. And this Cap Anson thing, it really, I guess for me, struck a chord because of what's happening with the Negro Leagues. I didn't know that MLB was going to absorb the Negro Leagues. It just kind of coincided where I felt like I'm glad I'm working on this given what they're going to do next. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the Negro Leagues is just a glorified Winter Dominican Republic uh, off season thing, right? We don't, it's just a different standard and a different culture, a different way of playing baseball. And as I go on in future streams, I'm going to prove that to you guys. So this is me laying down the foundation for future streams, which I'm trying to decide if I'm going to come to you daily or if I'm going to do like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I've already mentioned that I'm going to switch over to the mornings. This is just me figuring everything out, getting comfortable, figuring out the lights. I think I got the sound down pretty well. Uh, figuring out the wardrobe. Miss Mexico just won Miss Universe, and she is beautiful. So she kind of raised the bar on the beauty side. I'm like, okay, Mexican women, we have a look, right? Most of us are dark hair, dark eyed. And I happened to see it on Twitter and I was like, oh, geez, I've got to raise my beauty bar up a little bit. So I'm trying to figure all this stuff out. So thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for lending me your ear once again. And thank you for those of you who watch on the replay or drop in and out of the line stream. I do appreciate it. Um, so again, Cap Anson, even by modern accounts, is American baseball's first superstar. And maybe that's what put a target on his back. He's also among the original players who helped the sport become professional. So when the Knickerbockers were around, those were guys who were just baseball as a club. They were amateurs. It was just a bunch of men who got together to play this game that they evolved into their own, and then they managed to garner spectators. And then from there, baseball just continued to evolve based on American culture, which comes from England. England and Scotland is also the origin of golf. And that's the reason why some cultures gravitate toward it more than others, especially golf. I mean, I did watch one of the charity games on a Sunday last year. It was on, I don't know, one of the networks, and I did catch a an hour or two. We were watching it, and golf isn't really my thing, but again, that could be a cultural thing. Baseball caught my attention at a very young age, and there are reasons for that. I'm sorry. My hair does this stuff. And I'm not going to share all of the insights with you. Again, same thing with the social media platform thing. Some of the insights we might need to keep to ourselves as proprietary information for anything that we might have to do in the future. Um, but I got attached to baseball at a very young age. My mom tells me stories about me watching the games with my dad, and there was something that attracted me to the game at such a young age. And then as I was growing up, we all have stages in our life, right? Junior high, we enter our teen years, and then we get into high school, and then we go to college, and then from college we start our careers. Others start their families. So we all go through milestones in our lives, but baseball through all of that had been a constant for me until 2017, when I realized that MLB is rigged, engineered, and fake. So, so when I embarked on this, it after the 2018 World Series, which was also engineered and fake, um, I didn't plan on going this deep into baseball history. I didn't even think for a second that I would end up learning about Ty Cobb and Cap Anson, more about Babe Ruth, Christy Mathewson, Honus Wagner, Walter Johnson, Cy Young. Um, I really thought it was going to be something super simple, that it was just a bunch of nerds being nerds and invading the game of baseball through MLB. I honestly thought it was going to be something super simple, and it's turned out to be a very deep rabbit hole. And again, what I'm doing is sharing my perspective, um, to help restart America. And my perspective is the intersection of American baseball history and American history, which we do treat as church and which we do romanticize, because it was a very America's is based on romanticism, and there was a church aspect, a figurative church aspect. There are plenty of cultures around the world that have been around a lot longer than America, but they're not based in Christianity the way America was. And that's why this country has seen the type of growth that it has experienced. Other countries, again, have been around way longer and are far less civilized and have a definite lower standard of living. Um, but then America got absorbed by a different culture. I go back to the 1940s. It started in the early 1900s. I mean, of all things, another freedman tried to take over baseball in the early 1900s, and he was stopped by A.G. Spalding. Um, and so the direction that America has headed in parallels with the direction that MLB has headed into. And that is something. So the culture in America right now has this thing for the Africans and the African culture residing on American soil. They have decided to partner up with them. And so every time somebody gets canceled, if you've noticed, they get replaced by an African. So, for example, Ellen DeGeneres, I'm not going to defend her, but she is the latest casualty of cancel culture. She kind of brought it on herself anyway, but one of the candidates that I heard could replace her is an African. The article attached to this stream shows you that, I mean, I don't think Tom and Aaron did anything wrong, but they were canceled, and the person that replaced them is an African. Um, and we're seeing a lot of that right now, a lot of turning the table over. Americans are being replaced by Africans and others. And I believe that's the reason why the American baseball pioneers are being canceled one by one. I've said this before. If Babe Ruth, baseball survived because of Babe Ruth. If he wasn't so intertwined in the sport, I honestly believe that there would be an effort to cancel him as well. Sorry, one second. I believe that if Babe Ruth hadn't put the Yankees on the map, if he wasn't so intertwined in baseball just surviving, uh, everything that was happening at that point, the Great Depression, World War One, um, there would definitely be an effort to cancel Babe Ruth too. But he, like Tom Brady, are so intertwined in their professional sports. No matter how many people hate Tom Brady, you can't cancel him anymore. The man has established himself. I mean, just let him into the Hall of Fame before he even retires. I'm not sure why he needs the formality, but so Cap Anson's book, I believe he's very honest in it about the things that he did from his childhood through nearing the end of his career. He doesn't mention the exhibition game that took place in 83. He didn't mention the exhibition game that took place in 87, which MLB Marxists used to turn him into a villain. Cap Anson is blamed for starting uh, the color line in American baseball. And so I'm coming at this, I've got a couple of different perspectives. I believe that one of the reasons why I see things a little bit differently is because I'm a first generation American as opposed to an American that descends two, three, four, five generations in. So basically, this guilt stuff that's going around within the circles of American descendants doesn't touch me because I don't. my second, maybe the second, third generation of my family might be more of a target for guilt, but I don't feel any guilt at all. I feel pride. I'm thankful to be an American, born and raised here. Um, I think that that's winning the lottery as far as citizenship goes. And I respect this country. I never experienced anything negative. It could have been because I grew up in a homogeneous environment. And then even in college, I didn't experience anything. But again, I was around other first generation Americans, and that could have something to do with it. The other perspective that I bring into this is that I do walk between being Mexican by blood and then being American by birth. So I bring in a Mexican perspective into this in the sense that I've asked myself over the last few years if things ever got really bad in America and everyone just had to go back to their countries of origin. I think about the Mexico that I would have to go back to. And we all know that Mexico has two main issues, poverty and violence. And so I look at it as what if what's happening in America trickles down into Mexico? So what if we have to go back to our countries of origin, mine being Mexico, and but what if we have to go back to the problems happening here, meaning the people causing the current issues in this country decided to also take their way of thinking and their villainizing of the natives of other countries too, because they've done it to others. Roosh V tweeted out something about Romania. Romania basically experienced a lot of the issues that are happening on American soil by the same culture that's causing them here. And so it's this thing that they do apparently. And I think, okay, if they're going to bring their behavior to Mexico too, I kind of feel like we got to get ahead of it. And the way we get ahead of it is by just blocking it off and ending it, pushing back against the critical theory that they have spread out throughout the country and some Americans have bought into. Um, so that's part of the reason why I feel that Cap Anson deserves his due process, and somebody needs to tell the other side of the story. And in his book, he's honest. I'm going to talk about his attitude toward what he called, again, he didn't call them, he didn't use the, let's see, did he use the N word? I think he used it once, but he describes this man. His name was Clarence. He describes him as a darky and he describes him as a coon, but he also had a bad experience with this man. And it's I was brushing up on this before I came on. Um so let me there's a lot of subcategories tonight. So I'm trying to keep everything organized. So that I don't lose anybody who watches this video. I want to make sure that the line of thinking stays organized and linear so that there's no confusion, there's no room for, well, it's I want to make it as crystal clear as possible. So let's go to July 14th, 1887. Um, it was reported that American baseball had drawn the color line. So a baseball team pressured the league. At that time, it was known as the International League, and to stop giving contracts to blacks or Africans. And their reasoning was, if you keep giving contracts to blacks, white men don't want to play anymore. They don't want to play. So the way I see it is, they didn't want to play against Africans. They wanted to play among other white men. And I don't understand what the problem is with that at all. So my Mexican perspective is, Mexicans don't go around begging Americans to play soccer with them. Obviously, soccer isn't an American sport. It's not something that's caught on here. But there is a push, right, to bring attention to professional soccer on American soil. So Mexicans don't go around begging Americans to play soccer with them. Mexicans have their own teams, their own several leagues in Mexico. On American soil, if there's a soccer on the Spanish channels, it draws at 200,000 viewers, if not more. So I don't understand this thing about Africans had to play baseball with Americans. Like, I don't understand it at all to this day. And I've been looking at it for about 2 years. And especially because Africans did have the beginning of the Negro Leagues. So you've got like the Knickerbockers, for example, which were just a club. They wanted to play among their own. What's wrong with that? Like, I don't understand what's wrong with that. So this color line thing didn't stem from Cap Anson. Cap Anson is used as an excuse by several Marxists in MLB, including the SABR organization, which is an American. And the Americans that do have memberships in it are Marxists themselves. So it's not an American organization either. And so it was a team from Birmingham. Let me find it, because I just found this piece of information today, so it's still a little bit new. Um, Give me one more second. I know you're not supposed to allow dead air, right? I apologize for that. Mm, was it Birmingham or Buffalo? Let's see. So the report then shifted to the upstate New York meeting. The International League representatives held a meeting at the Jeunesse House in Buffalo yesterday and passed a resolution instructing Secretary White not to approve the contract of any more colored players. Jersey City and some other clubs insisted the African players drove white men from the league. And this is true. Um, it's just, again, why aren't Americans allowed to play among other Americans if they wish? So if they wanted to form an interleague, why didn't they form it? Why did they have to step on an existing league that wanted to simply play among their own? They weren't a corporation. They weren't the government. They weren't they weren't denying anybody civil rights. They weren't denying anybody the use of public utilities. They weren't denying anybody anything that was hurting them. And that additionally, the Negro Leagues were already getting themselves off the ground. So the resolution came from a team, and I thought I read somewhere that it was from Birmingham. It didn't come from Cap Anson. Cap Anson had nothing to do with this resolution. I don't even think Cap Anson was a part of the International League at that point. But somehow, Marxists with the MLB have decided to tie him into this resolution. And I believe it's simply because Cap Anson was the first American baseball superstar. And additionally, he was among those who helped baseball become professional. He's just being targeted the same way Ty Cobb got targeted. Ty Cobb was grouchy with other men too. He didn't single out. At that time, they called them colored. I call them African. Some people call them black. Okay. Um. So let me talk about an experience that Cap Anson had with what he called a darkie. So Cap Anson, I wonder how much of Cap Anson's attitude was influenced by, let's just call him colored, because that's what they were calling him back then. So he hires Clarence, whom he met in Philadelphia. Clarence was a singer and a dancer, and he paid him to be the mascot. And the Clarence got a better deal with some actress, and he jumped ship. And Cap Anson didn't forget that. So when American baseball went on their world tour in 1888, somebody smuggled him onto the train. Cap Anson wasn't happy about it because he remembers what Clarence had done, basically skipping out on the contract. And so if Cap Anson met Clarence in Philadelphia, Cap Anson played over there from like 1872 through 1875. So maybe that experience carried over into 83 and 87. I don't know. But if Cap Anson had that much of a problem with the color players that were on teams he faced in exhibition games, based on the other stuff that he talked about, I really believe that he would have pointed it out in his book, and he didn't. So either it wasn't that big of a deal, and even the media that was covering the game at that time didn't think it was that big of a deal either, to the point to cause him to answer back, right? Um, so Cap Anson had this bad experience with this Clarence character who jumped ship on a contract. And that's very interesting because um, so one of the colored players that was on this team that requested that no more contracts be handed out to colored players also skipped out on his contract for more money. And I feel that that's kind of a trend because who was most upset about the reserve clause, right? Some player that's only known for going to court, whose name actually escapes me at this time. But Africans seem to have a thing about skipping out on contracts. So That's something that demonstrates clashing cultures. So I believe that these men no longer wanted to play with colored players because it was a difference in cultures. They wanted to play among their own culture. And again, I'm not sure what's wrong with that. They weren't denying anybody's civil rights. They weren't causing harm. They simply wanted to play among their own. And 100 years later, somehow that's an issue when right now what we're experiencing is American white males are losing their jobs because they're white. So if you want to get upset about not being able to play baseball, how do you feel about the American white men who are losing their jobs or not getting promoted or being denied bank accounts or being denied services or getting kicked off social media because they're white? These are okay, they're not civil rights per se either, but they are services on American soil that were instituted by Americans, and now they can't participate in their own system. Additionally, you've got people being kicked off TV and being replaced by Africans. So let's not pretend that attacking your Ty Cobbs, your Cap Ansons, there's not something else behind that. It is nefarious and it is sinister. So let's just be honest about what the agenda is at this time. It's turning over the table. Americans are being kicked off their own soil and being replaced with Africans. Let's just be honest about it and move forward from there. I can tell you that if MLB decides to one day kick Cap Anson out of the Hall of Fame, that's the green light to break apart without any issues because Cap Anson contributed way more to professional American baseball than any of the African players that have come and gone after integration. Hank Aaron was just a compiler. Kirby Puckett is in the Hall of Fame, even though he only played a decade. I still don't understand why Ozzie Smith is in the Hall of Fame. And there are some others that I'll cover in a little bit more detail when I do one of my 2 Hall of Fame weeks. Derek Jeter, just a compiler, could have played on any other team and probably would have never got noticed. The New York media, however, built him up to a point where people can get over the fact that he never won any titles and that all of his championships are basically tainted because he played with steroid users. So let's be honest about stuff and let's not pretend. Stop clutching your pearls, okay? Like, stop clutching your pearls, Marxists. Your agenda is becoming more evident, more transparent. Um, you know, you're trying to go in a different direction, and that's fine because what's happening is you're creating an opportunity somewhere else. And it's fine. I personally think that there should be a break. I think that the majority of the post-integration players admitted into the Hall of Fame do not deserve to reside in the same hall as Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Christy Mathewson, Honus Wagner, Walter Johnson, and Cy Young. So if a break arrives, it arrives. I think it's a good opportunity. Um, okay, so I talked about this vote that occurred in 1887. I talked about Cap Anson and his own experience with an African. I talked about, um, let's talk about the man who brought this to the forefront. So this is 1983. Um, the man's name is Jerry Malloy, and he passed away in the year 2000. Something that caught my eye about Jerry is, first of all, he is Irish, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. Um, and he was very attached to the Negro Leagues. There is a conference named after him. There is, he wrote a book, and for some reason, he felt compelled to really defend the Negro Leagues. His political affiliation might have something to do with it. He was a member of the Democratic Action Party, and when I looked it up, I couldn't find anything. I found a lot of stuff from China, and I found a lot of other Asian countries. But as far as Americans go, I couldn't find a lot of stuff. So what I'm interpreting that as is that he's um, another Marxist that decided that Americans are evil somehow. Um, so he went after Cap Anson in 1983. There were some communications where he points out that his feeling is that Cap Anson started this color line. Now, again, why they were just playing baseball. Why is there such a need to be offended by that? Um, MLB today is skewing heavily toward foreigners. Again, it's obviously the people running the sport, they're not Americans. So I understand why they don't respect American culture, but I still don't understand why it's so offensive to some people that a bunch of men wanted to play amongst themselves. At that time, again, they weren't making millions of dollars the way they are today. Um, they weren't. It's just, again, for me, it's a little bit mind-boggling. So Cap Anson is simply another victim of cancel culture, and it runs in parallel to what's happening between MLB and America. Um, I wouldn't want America to become Africanized, and I wouldn't want it to become India. So that's really one of the main reasons why I'm here talking about Cap Anson, and I encourage people not to hide behind their agenda anymore. I think it's time to be honest about why there's such a push to cancel these men. Again, I keep saying this over and over, but Ty Cobb was just an American being an American on his own soil. Cap Anson was just an American being an American on his own soil. I don't understand why American resources are being funneled to foreigners who don't even respect this country. When I get into my Hall of Fame weeks, I will be bringing in the numbers. And I will hopefully at that time I'll have the software up and running so I can actually show you the charts that I put together comparing the original Hall of Famers numbers to those of that came after them. And again, if there's a break with MLB and they don't want to honor the American baseball pioneers, personally, that's okay with me. I think that the Hall of Fame first five and Cy Young and several other men that came after them, including Cap Anson, deserve to be celebrated as Americans, as pioneers, as men who contributed to the fabric of this country, and as examples of what Americans can accomplish. Uh, because it's just who they are. Um, and so, what else do I want to bring in? I talked about the page 6 article that I posted the link. Um, I mean, besides getting into more details about the man who singled out Cap Anson, I really feel that resolution from July 14, 1887 shows that Cap Anson wasn't involved in that vote. Um, let's see. Organizations like the Sabre Organization and Marxists like Jerry Malloy have done their best to tie in Cap Anson into the vote. But again, it's Cap Anson didn't talk about it in his book. I don't even think he thought it was that big of a deal, honestly. Um, let's see. So this portion of it, I'm scrolling through because I found it today. Um, and I believe it was Birmingham. Okay, Binghamton players petition. So Cap Anson had allegedly two incidents with two Africans, and one in '83, one in '87. MLB Marxists have tried to tie that to him to put a target on his back to get him canceled. I don't believe that one has anything to do with the other. Cap Anson had issues. Apparently, he scouted Cy Young, and when he saw Cy Young play in person, Cy Young did not have a good performance and apparently called him just a farmer. So apparently, word got back to um, to Cy Young, and Cy Young ended up, or Cap Anson ended up facing Cy, and it did not go well for Cap Anson. Apparently, Cy Young used the comment as fuel to get him out. And so, what I'm saying is, Cap Anson wasn't targeting a particular race or a particular culture. It was just who Cap Anson was. Again, Cap Anson has had his own bad experience with an African that may have influenced his attitude um, toward that culture. But I don't believe that he was running around targeting specifically Africans. And it wasn't Cap Anson that had anything directly to do with that vote on July 14, 1887. So again, there's a lot of things going on right now within MLB. They are elevating the Negro Leagues and they are elevating specifically Black players. They're going to play a Field of Dreams game in Iowa, Cap Anson's home state. And when you look at the ads and stuff, they feature two black players. So if when Americans were advertising to Americans, if that was a sign that Americans were advertising to whites only by using Americans in advertising in the 80s and the 90s, then what are we supposed to think when MLB advertises black players? To me, it tells me that MLB wants to be black, and that's fine. Again, I've mentioned before that if a break comes, that's fine. It's cool because that way we don't have to go through any legal mumbo jumbo. We can just say, hey, man, the sport is splitting off. You take your Negro League stuff and you run with that, and then other people are going to pick up the torch and carry on with in the tradition of the American baseball pioneers. And again, I don't have a problem with that. I welcome it at this point, because it's very clear that the sport is heading off in another direction. Um, and in the process, they're hurting Americans with all the gambling stuff that they're trying to legalize at the federal level. So I am going to start wrapping this up. Um, Again, Cap Anson is not a villain. He's only a villain in the eyes of Marxists in MLB because they are elevating the African player. For some reason, they feel like they have to protect them. And I mean, they can feel that way. But other people have the right to say, you know what, that's not what I want to watch. That's not something I want to participate in. So other people who feel that way, who feel shunned by the sport, have the right to move off in a different direction. And I personally don't see how um, we come back from that. So I want to thank everybody who listened, anybody who came into the stream, anybody who watches play. Um, So I'm closing now my Cap Anson series. Next weekend, I'm moving into What is an American. I'm going to do 2 episodes of that Saturday and Sunday night. Um, and I'm using American baseball history. So I'll be talking a lot about what A.G. Spalding wrote. And I'm going to use the article from Edward Marshall that he wrote November 1910, and then A.G. Spalding published in his book, um, to really start digging in deeper into this. This is the foundation of what I'm working on, and I have strong opinions about it, and I'm not apologizing for them. If they're offensive, they're only offensive to a specific culture, and I don't know what to tell you. This is We're living on American soil. We should all be grateful that the gates are still open to us, um, and that we're allowed to enjoy the benefits of having an American passport and being an American citizen. Um, so, thank you again. I will see you guys next Saturday evening. I will try to get in a little earlier. Um, But again, Cap Anson isn't a villain. He was just an American living on American soil, caused no harm to other people, um, except apparently in the eyes of Marxists within MLB. So thank you again. I will see you next week. Hope you have a good week. Thank you again. Good night.